Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Transforming Libraries for Graduate Students 2022 conference. My name is Elaine Walker from Mississippi University for Women. I'll be collecting questions in the chat for our session. This is called Ready for It, Training Library School Graduate Students to Provide Reference Services. And so with that, I'll let Sandy take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Elaine. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I know we're coming to the end of the conference. It's always nice when people join. So today we will be talking about graduate students in library school. So before we get started, I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement because I'm in Montreal, right? So I would like to acknowledge that we are all joining the session from many places, near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. I'm joining from the land on which McGill University is situated in Montreal, which is on the unceded traditional lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka. It's a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange for many First Nations. And I recognize and respect the Kanien'kehá:ka as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters within the Montreal community. And I encourage you all to research and learn more about the Indigenous peoples of your area. So first off, my name is Sandy, like I mentioned, and I'm the virtual reference coordinator at the McGill University Library. I'm also a liaison librarian, so I have two hats on. And today I'll be telling you a little bit more about our training program for our graduate students. So I'll start by giving you a short institutional context, just so you have an idea of a little bit more about the institution, but also the services we provide and how the program came to be, why we chose to do it, so what's the rationale behind it, the actual program itself, the major components of the training program, some of the special projects that we've had some of the students working on, and then some of the lessons learned and next steps. And if you have any questions, I think we'll have some time at the end for that, but don't hesitate. All right. So on to a little bit more of the context of the institution. So if you didn't know, McGill is located in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. It's a really research-intensive university. We have a lot of graduate programs at the master's and PhD levels. We have a medicine school, dentistry, and also law faculties. We have about 40,000 students. The library in itself has 8 branch libraries. I'm located at the Humanities and Social Sciences Library, which kind of serves as the de facto main library in the sense that it's the biggest branch with the most seating spaces, which students are always after, right? And we provide a lot of different service at the library, probably similar to a lot of other academic institutions, but we have in-person and virtual reference available to students, faculty, staff, and also members of the community, right? So we're open to everyone essentially, and also alumni. So to tell you a little bit more about our reference services, which I've mentioned before, so we have a physical reference desk at the Humanities and Social Sciences Library, where we usually have a librarian located there to help anyone who comes in with questions. So we are on shifts, right? Everyone has a 2-hour shift from Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And it is staffed by librarians solely. And then we also have a virtual reference service, which is offered through the LibAnswers platform, if you've ever seen that or are familiar with it. We answer questions via chat, email, and also text messages on the same platform. And the service is open for a little bit longer than the in-person one, which is a switch we've made mostly due to the pandemic. We used to have more in-person hours, but has changed, right? As we were closed for a longer period of time and people now expect a lot more services online. So virtual reference is offered Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and also on the weekends from 12 to 5 p.m. And it is also staffed by librarians. All right, so what is our rationale behind offering this program? So the program itself is we hire 2 graduate students who are studying in Masters of Information Sciences or Library and Information Sciences. And the goal is really to provide them with practical experience, because that's something that I learned from my own personal experience, but also talking to a lot of my mentees as I serve as a mentor in different associations, is that they get a lot more of the theoretical side and not necessarily a lot of practical experiences. At least that's the case from our library school. So they wanted to get more experience providing a lot of the basic duties of librarians, right? Our main duties. So providing reference, providing instruction. Those are things that don't necessarily get a chance to do. So for the first and foremost reason is really to give them an experience. And also it assists librarians who, as you may know, have different, like a lot of different demands on their time, right? They may have to teach classes or meet one-on-one with students. And if there's a tenure track system, they also have to do service and research. So it's quite demanding. So it does provide some relief for librarians. And it also provides, at the same time, a better service for users, right? Because we're able to offer the service for longer hours and have like more librarians staff it, so their questions are answered a little bit quicker. So all around, a very positive experience. All right, so a little bit more about the Graduate Student Reference Assistance, which is quite a mouthful in terms of title. So it's been a few years going. So the previous iteration of the project was in 2006, what used to be the Virtual Reference Committee. Before it became a sole position, it was overseen by a committee, and they would hire 2 graduate students to provide virtual reference services. So chat and email and text answers only. So in 2018, 2019, the program was expanded to include in-person reference. So we decided that it was, a good idea just to give them a better experience so that they could see both sides of reference services, in person versus virtual. It also kind of coincided with the year when the service was no longer overseen by a committee, but by a single person, me. So it made it easier to kind of oversee and supervise the students. So they're supervised directly by me. And they each provide 10 hours of reference services, so 20 hours in total. And it's a mix usually of chat reference and in person. It's a position, those positions are funded by the library, and we select them from our own School of Information Studies. We're fortunate that we have 2 in Montreal, actually, so we could potentially hire from the other one, but most of our previous cohorts of students have come from the McGill School of Information Studies. And we did have to, unfortunately, put it on hold in 2020, 2021 due to the pandemic and the financial insecurities that caused. So what I thought would be probably most interesting to you is hearing about our training program. So we offer quite an extensive training program to the students. It's over 20 hours. And it usually is going to encompass continuous training afterwards. So we'll start with an onboarding, right, to make sure that they're comfortable, they're aware of the institution, the policies, where things are, because they'll get a lot of questions about where certain buildings on campus are, but where certain things are in the library. So we make sure they're comfortable with that. And then we delve into a little bit more of like actual reference work. So doing some training on the reference interview, which very often they will have heard the basics of in library school, but we want to give them like a really solid background in reference interview training. Then we'll move on to the virtual reference platform, look at some of our online resources and how to share them, because they may get questions about any field of study. And that's the main thing about them being located at the Humanities and Social Sciences Library, is that because we're the biggest branch, we get students from all fields of study. So you could get a question from an engineering student, you could get a question from a history student, like a broad variety of topics. So we try to train them on those. And then they'll do some shadowing with different librarians. So a lot of this training I do with them, or I'm in charge, but I do try to provide them with some variety so they don't just hear me talking. So I will pair them with some of our more experienced librarians who've done reference for a really long time and really excel at it. For the shadowing, we'll try to pair them with some librarians in different fields of study, right? So that they can learn more about the humanities, the social sciences, medicine, the sciences. And then we'll continue on afterwards as they offer the service, provide some continuous training that's targeted either to their needs or things that interest them. So to give you a slightly, sorry about that, slightly more detailed view. So like I mentioned, onboarding, like tours, an overview of the desk and how it works. We've had a lot of COVID procedures in the last year to go over, circulation library policies, and that's usually about 2 hours. Then they delve a little bit deeper into reference training with me and some of our experienced librarians, where they do some training that's based on the RUSA guidelines for performing reference. They'll do a one-on-one with the experienced librarian. That's also 2 hours. And then we switch over, once they're comfortable with the actual reference interview, we'll switch over to virtual reference. So an overview of the platform and how it works, right? To be able to do simultaneously chat, text, and emails, and especially how it differs from in-person reference, right? You may not have some of the visual cues you would have in person. You may have to guide people through navigating a website. So some of the things that are a little bit different, some of the common questions that we've been getting, and that's also another 2 hours. And then, like I mentioned, the online resources looks at a lot of our catalogs, subject guides, databases, electronic tools. Shadowing, they do about 12 hours, both in person and online. So again, they could become very familiar with the online platform and with a variety of subjects and disciplines. And for continuous training, which I mentioned a little bit, is as needed, but I'll also arrange for them to meet with subject librarians that they want to know more about. Like this term, I had a student who's very interested in health sciences librarianship. So while she was on the desk, I got our wonderful medicine librarian to come and sit with her and really talk about what her job is, but also some of the best resources in that field of study. So that way she can learn more about it. And if she wants to have a career in that field, she knows a little bit more what to expect. And then I'll do some continuous assessment of their chat transcripts. So the conversations they've had, the questions they've answered on chat, to make sure that they're answering properly. So little spot checks here and there to check for areas of improvement, but overall they tend to do a really good job and are really committed to doing this well. All right, so a little bit more into the reference interview training. So what do we actually talk about? So we start off with what's a reference interview and why it's important, right? Some of the basics. What are the goals of it? We touch also on the RUSA guidelines of how to perform it well. What are the steps? What are some of the common challenges? Yes, common to the reference interview, but some things that also come up a lot with our own population, right? Like our own students. What are some kind of areas that can be a little bit challenging? How to properly refer, right? Because it happens a lot, like I mentioned, we can get questions about any topic at the reference desk. We've even gotten questions where people wanted to do very advanced systematic review searching. And there's only up to a certain point where you can take them, right? So how to properly refer to the correct librarian, which information to share, how to do that with the patron. And then we do some practice questions that may be a little intentionally misleading, just to see how they'll try to tease out a little bit more information. But those are always fun. So here are the RUSA guidelines for the behavioral performance of reference and information service providers. So they are kind of probably pretty basic, reference behaviors that you've seen before. Obviously, they're not perfect, and there's some issues with that we'll discuss a little bit later on. But at its core, it's approachability, interest, showing interest in the questions you're getting, listening, which I think is very important as a librarian, and trying to tease out what people want, really understanding their question, and then the search part, and then follow up to make sure that what we're finding is really what they're asking for, right? That we're really understanding their question and filling their need. And I touched on this a little bit before, but I mentioned that in addition to doing reference services, because it's not necessarily always super busy, right? Of course, if it's midterms or finals, you may get one question after another, but there are periods in the semester where it can be a little bit quieter, right? When it's like reading week, for example. So to occupy them during that time when they're at the desk and there's no one, or they're on chat and it's really quiet, we'll usually assign like little special projects that they can complete when they're at work. And those usually tend to have flexible guidelines because, again, it depends on how busy the service will be and the demands on their time. But we'll pair them with librarians who have special projects they want to complete. So some previous examples have been like working on bibliographies or creating a subject guide in our LibGuides platform. So they can, as time permits, start populating certain areas of the guide under the guidance of a librarian in that subject area, which enabled them to, again, learn more about a specific area of librarianship, which there are at our School of Information Studies some courses that are targeted to certain areas like law librarianship, health sciences, but it doesn't exist for every single discipline, right? So that way they can deepen their knowledge a little bit on different subject areas. They also get opportunities to co-teach information literacy instruction sessions. So some of those include some citation management tools or some courses that will teach to undergraduates. So sessions that are essentially how to do research as an undergraduate, right? Like search strategies and how to search, those sorts of workshops. So we'll pair them, ask first the librarian who's teaching them if they would be open to it. And then they work with the librarian to, if they want to change the content, if they want to adapt it a little bit more for their own delivery, what they want to teach. So they get practical experience delivering a workshop, planning for it. And that goes a long way to put that on your CV, right? So really trying to make sure that they get a well-rounded experience, not just reference, but also other little things that they can put on their CV that will contribute to making them hopefully better librarians in the future. They've also done some outreach projects like curating book displays, which again is something that they can take with them, even if they're not interested, say, in academic librarianship and prefer public librarianship. That's something that is a very transferable skill, right? And this is the part that's a little bit more informal. So it's not part of their official training program where we attempt to give them skills to be good librarians. But I do try to offer a lot of mentorship as much as they want it, especially for the students that we have that are interested in academic librarianship and want to work in academic libraries, making sure that they have the support, especially if they're graduating. In the past, we've had students that were either first years in the master's, students that were second years. So for the ones that are second years, they're very much thinking about applying for jobs and going for interviews. So I really tried to help them with their CVs. I'm on the search committee where I work at McGill, so I cannot help them with McGill applications, but I could give them general tips to have a good CV, how the interview process goes, how to apply for academic jobs. As we know, those tend to be quite different from other employment they've had in the past, especially the interview process, especially the one full day interviews. So I try to offer them that. And then mostly also facilitating meetings with other librarians so that they can learn about different positions in the library, right? There's liaison librarians, but there's a lot of other jobs that librarians can have. So making sure they can learn about that or different subject areas. I know they really enjoyed that part, like learning from different librarians is a comment they bring back every single year. Every new cohort mentions that they really like the opportunity to meet different librarians and learn from different subject areas. And when I can, I do try to provide them with as much support and opportunities for scholarly work, like scholarship. So this year, for example, I will be presenting at a conference with the students. They will be first authors on it. We'll work together on a project, but at least they'll be able, because they're interested in this field, they will be able to put that as a conference presentation on their CV. And if they want to turn that into an article later on, we will do that too. I've actually done that a couple of years ago with a previous cohort of students where we wrote a scholarly article together evaluating virtual reference transcripts. So they get some research experience and also like a really good publication that they can put on their CVs, which will hopefully help them with their careers. So finally, some lessons learned and next steps. So like I mentioned, students really appreciate the opportunity to meet with different librarians and learn about different subject areas. So I mentioned one of them was really interested in health sciences librarianship. So they got to learn a lot more about that field of study. Others wanted to know more about French studies librarianship or engineering librarianship. So they got to have those interactions. And they really, this is purely anecdotal, I have not done a survey, but they very frequently mention how they appreciate the opportunity to have practical experience, to see actual users, to actually answer their questions, to help students. They're always very excited when they get actual true reference questions. So that's something that they very much appreciate. Next steps for me. So I've already mentioned how sometimes the RUSA guidelines are helpful, but maybe a little more basic. They don't necessarily deal with everything or more recent developments. So something I'm hoping to look into more over the summer is like reference services and anti-racist work. So how can we actually support anti-racism and dismantle white supremacy at a reference desk? So I would like to incorporate that component into the training so they're aware of this. From my understanding, it's also not something that's discussed a whole lot in librarianship programs, although I may be wrong, but it's never a bad idea to discuss it more. And I also want to do some continuous evaluation of the training program. So see how efficient it is and how helpful it is for the students, and which reflects itself in the quality of the interactions that users are going to have with them. All right, so I've put my references at the end, and I've used this wonderful slide template by Slide Carnival. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But also mostly thank you for coming. But yeah, don't hesitate if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Actually, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I was wondering if you have had a chance to put your students into a grant writing process. And I know sometimes that just comes down to timing, because some roll around every year or every other year.
Yeah.
Oh, and then our students tend to be temporary as they move on to their careers. But I was just wondering about that process, including that in the training.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And it's something I've been thinking about. To be perfectly honest, we don't do a whole lot of grant writing at my library. Other units do. Like I know our unit that focuses on rare books, they write a ton of grants. My unit, we're not really involved with those all that much. In fact, I'm trying to get in on grants with some of my faculty members. But it is something
Esther,
that
can you hear
would
me?
be, it
Okay,
is
hold on
something
just a
that,
second. I have something going in the background. Let me see if I
okay. It is definitely something that I think would add, right? Especially to that scholarship component if they're asked to do that in the future. So that's a really good idea. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. I just know that that's another awesome thing to have on your CV or resume
Yeah,
coming out of grad school.
something I would look for myself, actually.
Yeah, and I never had a chance to do that before I got into the job that I have now. So I was definitely very green that first time around. Have had a couple of rejections, but I've also had one successful one go through.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've brought up with them too, is like when we wrote that conference proposal, is that I got rejected from so many conferences my first year as a librarian because I didn't know you were not supposed to name the institution in it. I didn't know it was an anonymous process. No one had told me. So I was completely unaware. So little things like that for us seem perfectly normal, but no one tells you in library school. So you don't know, right?
True.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have Sandy's email if you guys come up with questions later. I know sometimes it's hard to think of them on the spot. So that's fine.